Now, part of setting up the gun effects is to spawn in Niagara effects and also different static meshes onto the gun itself. So first, we need to take some variables into consideration before we proceed with our gun effects. So I'm going to open up our S weapons info. Now, the first variable is going to be our sound base variable. Now, this is basically our firing sound, and this should be of type sound base, object reference. And this is basically how the gun is going to sound every time you fire. And the second one is going to be a static mesh. So this will be our shell eject mesh. And so every time you fire the weapon, we want this little bullet to jump out of the gun to kind of make it realistic. So let's make this a static mesh object reference. Our next variable is going to be our trace. So this would be Niagara effect, Niagara system underscore trace. So this is basically that bullet traveling animation through the air. So it has a little smoky animation to it. And this is going to be of type Niagara system object reference. And if you open up your weapon, usually whenever a weapon is created, they would have different bones for the weapon, and a muzzle flash and also the shell eject are two bones that normally comes with every guns out there. If there is no bones of this type, you just need to put in the shell eject where the bullets will come, basically the side of this weapon right here. And then also muzzle flash will be at the very tip of the weapon, just like here. You could always click on the root of the weapon and add in a new socket, and then you can use this as your muzzle flash or for your shell eject. So we're going to take these two bone name into consideration in our weapons info. So add in a variable for our muzzle flash underscore socket, and this would be of type name. And the next variable is going to be our shell eject underscore socket, and this would be of type name as well. Now let's go back to our weapon base. And before we go into the gun effects in our manage arrays, let's make sure that we call in our delay event, just like so. And the type, we would just need to plug this in here, or you can always drag off of this and say get type, and then you can do this. Either way works. Compile and save it. And now we can close this out. We can go ahead to our gun effects. Inside of here, we're going to add in a sequence node. Off of then 0, we're going to set up our sounds and also our Niagara systems as a local variable. So I'm going to drag in my weapons info. And here I'm going to do a break. And here we only want 3 items. We want the trace, the shell eject mesh, and also our sound base. These are the 3 things that we want. So we're going to drag off of our sound base and we're going to promote it to a local variable. And this would be named as local underscore sound. And we're going to drag in our shell eject and then again promote it to a local variable. This would be local underscore shell eject underscore mesh. And our trace is going to be a local variable as well. This would be local underscore ns underscore trace, ns for Niagara system. Let's go ahead and plug this in here. And this would be connected to 0. Now we're going to create another local variable. This is to determine when we play the sound, do you want to play it from the beginning or do we want to continue on with the playing? So for example, for pistol, you don't want to play it from the beginning because there's going to be a huge gap between the fire. But with the assault rifle, we want to make sure that we play it from the beginning. I'm going to create a new variable and this would be play from start. And again, this would be a local variable. And here I'm going to drag this in and I'm going to do a set. And this set is going to be determined on the type of the weapon. We're going to right click and search for get type. And at the very bottom, you should find the get type. Here, we're going to do a select. We're going to right click on the rifle and then change the pin type to a Boolean. And that will change everything into a Boolean. And the return value is something that we're going to go ahead and plug into this play from start, local play from start. And if it is a rifle, we want to play from start. If it is pistol, we don't want to play from start. That's it. Unarmed, we're just going to leave it as it is, empty. Okay, so now this allows us to have different sounds for different weapons that you're adding. So this is all part of the expansion plan for our weapon system, right? So let's go ahead and set that up really quickly. So in our data table, I'm going to select the AR4. And at the very bottom, I should have my sound base. If you had downloaded this CrossHair project, it comes with the Lyra pack attached to it, and that has a lot of sounds. So inside of this components, if you go to demos, epic content, Lyra content, audio, sounds, and then weapons, you have your rifle sounds and your pistol sounds. For rifle sound, we're going to select this meta sound source as our sound base. And for the shell eject mesh FX folder, and inside of this FX folder, there should be meshes and then bullet shells, and then you have your pistol shell and your rifle shell. So in our AR4, we're going to go ahead and select our pistol rifle shell. And for the pistol, because we're already there, I'm just going to select our pistol shell. And for the trace, we're going to go back into that Lyra content again, and then we should have FX, particles, weapons, and then there's your tracer. So that is what is going to be our Niagara system for our trace. And for the Muzzle Flash socket, we're going to go to our weapon, copy our Muzzle Flash bone name, and then paste it in here. And our shell eject, copy bone name, and we're going to put that in our shell eject, just like so. So each weapon is going to have its own. I'm going to quickly do the same for our pistol as well. Our pistol doesn't have a muzzle flash or the shell eject, so I'm going to quickly create one here. So select the gun body, and I'm going to create a new socket. And then this socket, I'm going to rename this as muzzle. And we're going to go ahead and move this socket all the way to the front of the gun, just on the tip there, maybe a little bit inside. And then same thing, select the gun body and create a new socket, and this will be our shell eject. Now move this over to the side of the weapon where the shells could actually come out of the weapon. So now I can go ahead and copy this name, plug it into the data table for us, for our shell eject, and the muzzle as well. Now we can go ahead and save it. Back in our weapon base, let's start adding in the different functionalities. So first function that we're going to create is our muzzle flash. Our muzzle flash, we're going to go ahead and call in for spawn system attached. And this is basically to spawn in Niagara effects. Now for the actual effect for muzzle flash, all the weapon is going to have the exact same muzzle flash effects. So in that same component folder where Lyra affects particles and weapons, you have the NS weapon fire. This is basically the muzzle flash effects, and this will be the same for all the weapons, so that's why I didn't add it to our structure. But if you have different muzzle flash effects for different weapons, please feel free to add that to your structure and your data table. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up just like so. And attached to component, it's going to be our skeletal mesh. I'm going to drag and connect the skeletal mesh in here. Attach point name is going to be our muzzle flash. So I'm going to drag in our weapons info and do a get and then break it here. And we only need the muzzle flash socket. And we're going to plug this in here just like so. And the return value, we're going to go ahead and promote it to a variable and name this ns underscore muzzle to Niagara system muzzle. And because we're going to be having multiple bullets, which is going to trigger this muzzle flash, so let's make sure that we do a validation check. So drag in your muzzle flash and then check to see if it is valid. Connect this to the execution here. And also we want to check to see if it is active, because we don't want like 15 muzzle flashes playing on our screen. That's going to affect the quality of everything. So we're going to go ahead and check to see if this is active. And then add a boolean here. And connect this boolean to the isValid node. And if the muzzle flash is not already valid, then we're going to go ahead and create that muzzle flash effects. And then again, if the muzzle flash is not active, then we're going to go ahead and create that as well. And here we're going to go ahead and add in a boolean. So we're going to again do a check to make sure that it is valid at the end of it. And then if it is valid, then we'll want to create a new boolean variable. And this would be named as muzzle flash trigger. And let's go ahead and set this to valid as false. So once we set this up as false, we're going to drag in our muzzle flash trigger to do a quick update. So we're going to do a get and then look set this to not boolean. And then we're going to do a set muzzle flash trigger. And this needs to be connected to 2 points in the graph. First is to from the set, we're going to go ahead and connect it here just like so. And then also off of this, we want to connect it to our false true branch over here. This is basically to say if it is already valid, then we don't need to recreate it, right? That's basically what we're doing here. We're going to send this information to our Niagara system. So drag in your NS muzzle and drag off of this and search for set Niagara variable. And this should be of type bool, and not the by string, just by a bool. And then here we're going to connect this here directly. And the in value would be our muzzle flash trigger. And the variable name is going to be user.trigger. Now, all of this is already built into this Niagara system. So that's why we're using all of these variable names. It comes with the pack, so we're just going to go ahead with it. We haven't really created in this variable name and stuff. And this is all you have to do. This is a custom Niagara FX, and that's why it has variables that we need to edit inside of it. And that's why we're sending this bool through. So that is the function for the Niagara FX for our muzzle flash. So in our handle gun effects, then one, we can go ahead and call in our muzzle flash. Now we need to do the fire sound. So let's go ahead and call in a new function for the fire sound. And the fire sound will require the actual sound itself, which is going to be our sound base object reference. And also we need to give it the Boolean as in play from start. And this will be our Boolean. So in our handle gun effects, we can go ahead and plug in this fire sound. And in our local variable, we have our local sound. Let's plug this in here, and also local play from start. Let's plug this in here. In our fire sound, we're going to go ahead and do the same thing as we did for the muzzle. So we're going to have a spawn sound attached, and the sound asset would be our sound asset here. So we're going to go ahead and say get sound. That's the variable. Plug this in here just like so. And attached to component would be our skeletal mesh component. So we want the sound to come out of the weapon. Our attach point is going to be hand_R. And this is generic name of a bone from all skeletons that you use in Unreal Engine. So you can just type it in as hand R. And the sound basically will sound like it's coming from the hand. But that's closest to the weapon itself, right? So the return value, we're going to again promote it to a variable. And this would be audio component. We're going to do a validation check here. So drag in this audio component, do a get, and then do a is valid and connect the execution pin here. And also we're going to go ahead and get this get play from start and connect this to a Boolean branch here and connect this to is valid. Now, if the audio component is not already, then we want to go ahead and spawn the sound and make the noise. And if it is set to true, then let's go ahead and again do a validation is valid. This will prevent errors if anything goes wrong. That's why we're doing this is valid check. And we want to connect this to a branch. And here, if it is play from start, let's connect the true to this branch. And also if it is valid, connect this to the branch. And then connect this condition to get play from start. And if it is play from start and this audio component is valid, then we're going to go ahead and drag in our audio component. And here we're going to say play. Start time is going to be 0 because we want to play it from start. Now, if it is false, then we're going to drag in our audio component and we're going to execute a trigger parameter, set this to false, and in name would be fire. Compile and save this, and this is how you're going to have your fire sound. So fire sound is set up and your muzzle flash is set up. Now we're going to go ahead and set up our shell eject, create a new function for this, and this would be named shell_eject. And the shell eject requires a static mesh, which is our shell mesh of type static mesh object reference. And the shell eject is going to have the exact same settings that we just did. So it's going to be spawn system attached because we're going to spawn in a Niagara system. And the template is going to be a shell eject template. If you search for shell eject, it's part of that Lyra pack that comes with this component. And the attached to component, it's exactly the skeletal mesh here. And the shell eject, we actually have it on our weapons info. So drag in our weapons info, break it, and we need the shell eject socket name, and then plug this in here. And then we're going to promote this to a variable, and this would be ns_shell eject. Again, we're going to do a quick validation to prevent any errors. So we're going to get our shell eject and see if it is valid. Connect this here. And then also we're going to go ahead and see if it is active. Connect this to a Boolean branch and connect the branch to the valid. And again, if the FX is not valid, then we're going to go ahead and spawn in this attached And if the effect is not active, we're also going to go ahead and spawn in this Niagara system. And after we set up our shell eject, we're going to go ahead and again do a isValid function, make sure that it is still valid. And if it is valid, then we want to drag in our Niagara system shell eject. And off of this, we're going to do another custom variable for set Niagara variable. And this would be a static mesh. Connect this to isValid. In variable name would be user dot shell eject static mesh. In value is the mesh itself. So if I say get shell mesh, then I should have this shell mesh and then plug this in here directly. And this shell mesh is what we sent in previously. And now we need to create a new variable, and this would be shell eject trigger. Again, this is to update our triggers. And this would be a Boolean. Let's go ahead and set this here as false. We're going to drag in our shell eject Boolean, and we're going to do a not Boolean and do a set. And plug this set to out of this execution here, and also from our true statement from our branch previously. Plug this in here just like so. And we need to now send in a user trigger update to our Niagara system. So we're going to drag in our shell eject, and we're going to set Niagara variable, and this would be of type bool. Set, connect this to the set, and in variable name is going to be user.trigger, and in value is going to be our shell eject trigger. Now in our handle gun effects, we can go ahead and plug this shell eject here, and the shell mesh would be our local shell eject mesh. And the last one that we're going to do here is the tracer. So we're going to create a new function, and this would be named as tracer. And the tracer requires an input. This would be our trace Niagara system. And this would be of type Niagara system object reference. And the tracer, again, same thing. We're going to spawn system attached. And the system template is going to be this trace ns. So we're going to go ahead and do a get trace ns. Plug this in here. And the attached to component is the skeletal mesh. And our attach point is going to be off of our muzzle. So we're going to get our weapons info. Break our weapons info here. And we only want our muzzle flash socket here. So we're just going to connect that. And we're going to take this return value, and then we're going to promote it to a variable. And this would be ns underscore trace, Niagara system underscore trace. And again, same validation check. Drag in this trace and do a isValid. And connect this to the execution pin, and we are also going to check if it is active and do a Boolean branch here and set this to isValid, and not valid, and also the false, we're going to connect it to our Niagara system here. And now we're going to go ahead and do a isValid again. If it is valid, we want to create a new variable. This would be our trace trigger. And go ahead and plug this into isValid and set this to false. And we're going to drag in our trace trigger, get, and then we're going to do a not Boolean. And we're going to set this just like so. Plug the execution of the set here, and also the true execution pin of the branch should be connected here as well. And now we're going to drag in our ns trace, and we're going to set the Niagara variable, set Niagara variable bool. Connect this to the set here. And again, in variable name would be user.trigger. And the in value would be our trace trigger, just like so. And we want to send the impact position to Niagara so that it can stop when it impacts something. So we're going to drag in our ns tracer here. And we're going to call in Niagara set vector array. And connect this to the execution pin here. And the array data is going to be our impact point array. And our override name would be user.impact positions. And now back in our handle gun effects, we're going to go ahead and plug in our tracer. And the tracer Niagara system is going to be our local ns trace, just like this. And the last thing that we want to do is to go ahead and clear our arrays. So we're going to create a new function for clearing our arrays. And this is going to be pretty straightforward. You just need to drag in your impact point to a get, and then impact normal to a get, and then go ahead and clear the array, just like so. So this will get rid of any other positions that the previous bullet had kept a record of. This is going to get rid of it. So and now connect that clear arrays to your node here, just like so. And that's it for our fire function. The next thing that we need to do is in our event graph, after we do our line trace, we need to go ahead and call in our manage hit result function and connect this hit result in here, compile. Now that we have done our fire and our fire animations, let's work on some miscellaneous items like our dynamic spread of the bullets and then also a camera shake. We're going to go to our structure, and here we're going to add in 3 variables. The first one is going to be our fire spread. And the second one is going to be our fire spread recovery. And the third one is our camera shake scale. All these 3 values would be float. Let's go ahead and save it. And in our DT weapons info for our AR-45, for the fire spread, I'm going to set this to like about 25. And the fire spread recovery, I'm going to set this to 1. And our camera shake scale is going to be set to 1 as well. And for our pistol, our fire spread is going to be about 10. And our spread recovery is going to be 1. And our camera shake is about 1.5. Again, you can play with these numbers to see what exactly fits and what works for you. I'm just using arbitrary numbers here. We're going to go to our components here and then drag in our CMPT crosshair variable. And off of this, we're going to call in the function add dynamic spread. This is a function that's built into the component. And we're going to connect this to then 1. And this requires the spread and the recovery rate. So we're going to go ahead and get our weapons info and do a break. And for this weapons info, we only need the fire spread and the fire recovery. So we're going to go ahead and select those 2 and then plug this in here. And next, we're going to go ahead and drag in our player camera manager. And off of this, we're going to search for start legacy camera shake. And again, this is a function that's built into Unreal Engine. You don't have to build it. And this, we need a shake class. Now, part of the component pack, you actually get a BP camera shake, and we're going to go ahead and use that. You can also feel free to use the legacy camera shake. Not big of a difference here. And the scale is going to be our camera shake scale. So I'm just going to extend it here and then just plug it in here just like so. And for the user player rotation, we're just going to set this to 1, 1, and 1. So here's an important piece of this puzzle that you must complete for all of this to tie in together for it to work. Now, all of the new variables that we add to our structure was not part of our entire setup when we originally created our structures and databases and created a save game system. Right now, because we have a save game system, we're going to have a cache that's going to keep track of our old structure values, and none of the new values that we entered is going to take effect. Every time the game loads, the game is going to take a look at our cache data from our save file, and then it's going to load that data in. And none of these information, like the fire rate, our fire animation, all of this information was not part of our save game function that we previously created. Now we have to force the game to update the information from the S weapons info manually. Now this is going to be just a simple code. You just need to plug it into whenever the game starts, and then it's going to go ahead and update our existing weapon in our save file with all of these changes. So in the future, if you were to add more functionality to your weapon structure, that update function that we're going to create now is going to handle updating older weapons that were saved in the player file with all of these additional information. And this is going to be very helpful when you do updates for your game in the future. So let's go ahead and do that function. Go to your content drawer, go to third person, blueprints, and open up your third person character. In your third person character, find where you have the initialize character function, where we're getting our backpack and loadout data from a save game, and we're setting it up here. So we need to go ahead and create the update function on both of these components. So first, we're going to go to our BPC loadouts. We can right click and edit to open it up. And we're going to create a new function, and this would be update underscore weapons data. Straightforward stuff. We're just going to drag in our loadout content here, our array, and drag off of this and do a for each loop. Connect this here. And for the loop body, we're going to get data table row, and it's going to be row names. And this is going to be our weapons info. Off of the out row, we're going to go ahead and do a for each loop. Off of this loop body, we're going to go ahead and say get data table row. Connect the array element to the row name, and then the data table set this to our weapons info. And this out row, we're going to go ahead and break it. We're going to go back here to our first for each loop, drag off of this array element. Let's bring it closer. And we're going to do a break. And then off of our weapons info, we're going to go ahead and do a break again. And here we're going to drag off of this name, and we're going to go ahead and do an equal, and then plug this name here just like so. And then connect a branch and connect this to the row found. Compile. And if this is true, then we'll want to get our loadout content. And then we're going to go ahead and set array element. And the index is going to be our array index from our first loop here. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this and plug it in here just like so. And this item, I'm going to drag off of this and do a make loadout struct. And the weapon info comes from this out row. Plug this in here. And the slot quantity is going to be coming from here. So what we have effectively done is we went through each and every single weapon that's in our loadout content, and we compared it against our data table with all of these new information. And when the name matches, because remember, we have very unique names to these items. So when the name matches, then we're going to go ahead and reset that array element with this newly updated data. So all the old structure information will be gone, and the newer structure information with these additional lines will get updated in there. And that's all you have to do here. And now this function, we're going to go ahead to our initialize character. Off of BPC loadouts, we're going to call in this update weapon data function. Plug this in here. And we're going to do the same thing for our backpack as well. So we're going to right click on the BPC backpack, edit backpack, and here functions, update underscore weapons data. Same thing, drag in our backpack struct and do a for each loop. Drag off of this loop body, and we're going to say get data table row names, and set this to our weapons info. And the out row, we're going to do a for each loop. And off of this out row, we're going to go ahead and break the weapons info. And off of the array element, we're just going to drag it over, just like we did previously, and then break our backpack S backpack. And we're going to drag off of this S weapons, and then we're going to break it here and do the same thing. We're going to drag off of our name, say equals, and plug this in here, and then do a branch and connect this branch to the row found and connect this boolean here just like so. And off of true, we're going to drag in our backpack struct, and we're going to set array element, connect this to true here. And the array index here where we did our for loop on the backpack struct, we're going to drag this array index, and we're just going to plug it in here. And the item, we're going to drag off of it, and then we're going to make backpack. And the weapons info is going to be this out row. We're going to plug it in here. And the slot type, we're going to leave it at weapon. And the slot quantity, we're just going to plug this in here directly. And that's it. And now we're going to go ahead and save it. And in our third person character, we're going to drag in our backpack. And here we're going to say update weapons data. Plug this in here. Let's go ahead and play the game. And if I go ahead, approach this assault rifle and then pick this up, I should be able to equip it. And now if I press 1, pull out the weapon, right click to aim. And then if I hold down my fire button, I go ahead and fire. Now if I go ahead to pistol, pick up this pistol. Right now, if you were to press the fire button, is not going to fire. The reason why it's not firing is because how the timer works. Now for our pistol, our fire rate is set to 0.6. That means in my weapon base where I have my timer function, this timer will only run every 0.6 seconds. That means if I hold down the pistol button, so if I go ahead and press play, and if I hold it down, you can see that I'll fire. So what we're really missing is that first bullet before this timer really starts. So because we want to do the manual shot as soon as the player presses the left mouse button, and then from there onwards, we should make it automatic. The fix is pretty straightforward. Drag in this ammo check, and then plug this in here just before we set up our timer. And this is all you have to do to have that first shot to be a manual shot. And from there onwards, the fire rate should take over and then control the remaining shots. So if I press play now, when I press the fire button, the manual shot is going to go through every time. But if I go ahead and hold, the fire rate is going to kick in now. So folks, that's it for the fire functionality and also all of these effects that we have added. In our next video, we're going to take a look at how to reload the weapon and also add more ammo into the weapon and also do the reload animation while reloading the weapon. Looking forward to seeing you there, and I'll catch you on the next one.